The night was cold and empty. The battlefield was silent now, but it had not always been silent. Smoke still rose from broken machines, twisted metal, and black scars on the ground. The stars above were hidden by dust, as if even the sky refused to look down at this place. She lay there, the alien woman, her skin pale with strange marks glowing faintly. Her people had fought here. Her army had shouted their war cries. But when the battle turned against them, they ran. They left her, broken and bleeding. To them she was weak, a burden, useless, and so they abandoned her. Her breath was slow, her chest rising and falling with pain. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. In her mind, she thought of the stars she would never see again. She thought of her mother's voice, long forgotten. She thought of her people's promise of glory, a promise that had turned to dust. Her heart whispered, "It is over." Darkness pressed in, heavy, cold, final. But then, light. A soft glow broke the dark behind her eyelids. She forced her eyes open, thinking perhaps it was death come to take her. Instead, she saw a face, not her. People, not her enemy's machines, a human. He was leaning over her, his face dirty, his clothes torn. Blood ran down the side of his arm, but still he held her. His hands were shaking as he pulled her from the rubble. His eyes, dark and alive, locked onto hers. For a moment, time froze. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. The human put a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered, his voice low but firm. He dragged her away from the open ground, pulling her under broken walls and shattered stone. Every step cost him pain, yet he did not let her go. Her mind spun. Why, she thought. Why would a human do this? They were enemies. They had killed each other's people. Why would he save her? The smell of smoke burned her lungs. The sound of distant machines echoed in the night. But his hand was steady on her arm, guiding her. Her body screamed with pain, her vision blurred. Yet she followed. Not by choice, but by the strange strength in his touch. They reached a corner of the battlefield where shadows hid them from the searchlights above. He lowered her gently against a wall. Her head fell back, her breath heavy. He reached into his torn pack, pulled out a canteen. Without hesitation, he pressed it to her lips. She turned her face away, suspicious, but thirst betrayed her, and she drank. The water was warm, bitter. But to her, it was life. When she looked at him again, he was already scanning the darkness. Every sound made him tense. Every flicker of light made his eyes narrow. He was ready to run, ready to fight, ready to die, yet he stayed by her side. She whispered, "Why?" Her voice broken, weak. The human glanced at her, his jaw tight. "No one deserves to die alone," he said. Then he turned back to the shadows as if the answer was simple, as if saving her was nothing more than a natural act. Her people had left her, but this stranger, this human, had chosen to stay. The thought burned in her chest, confusing and strange. She should hate him, she should fear him. Yet in that moment, she felt something else, something she had never known before. The silence grew thick around them. Far away, explosions rumbled. Lights swept across the horizon, but here in the broken corner of the battlefield there was only the two of them. She looked at his hands, rough and bleeding. She looked at his eyes, sharp but alive. And for the first time in her life she wondered if everything she had been told about humans was wrong. Her eyelids grew heavy again, pulling her down. But now she no longer welcomed the darkness. Now, she wanted to stay awake, to see what this human would do, to know why. And deep inside she feared something new, that if she closed her eyes again, this time, he would be gone. So she fought the sleep. She clung to the sound of his breathing, steady and strong beside her. She clung to the warmth of his presence, and in her heart, for the first time since she was abandoned, she did not feel alone. The night stretched on, the machines searched, the ruins groaned. But in the shadows, a broken alien and a wounded human sat together, strangers, enemies, survivors, and the war was no longer just about armies and weapons. It was about this moment. It was about a hand that did not let go. The night grew colder, the ruins around. then whispered with the wind. Broken towers stood like ghosts and fire burned faintly in the distance. The alien woman leaned against the wall, her eyes half closed. She wanted to rest, but the sound of footsteps in the distance pulled her back to fear. The human crouched beside her. His face was pale, his arm bleeding, yet his eyes were sharp. He had no reason to help her, no reason to stay, and yet he did. Each sound of danger made him glance toward the shadows, but every time he looked back, his hand stayed firm on her shoulder. The alien woman spoke weakly, her voice trembling. "You should go, leave me here. I will only slow you down." The human shook his head. His voice was rough but steady. "I don't leave people behind." His words struck her like a blade. Her own people had left her, but this enemy refused. Why, she thought. Why would he risk his life for me? He could have escaped alone, he could have lived, but he chose otherwise. The noise outside grew louder. The machines were sweeping the ruins, their lights cutting through smoke and dust. The human looked at her, then at the open ground they had crossed. He took a deep breath, as if weighing his fate. Finally, he spoke. "We move." He pulled her arm gently, helping her rise. Her body screamed with pain, her legs weak, but his grip was strong. Step by step he guided her through shattered walls, past broken beams, across ground littered with ash. Every sound threatened to betray them. Every flicker of light made her heart race. They crawled under a collapsed bridge. They climbed over stone. She slipped once, falling against him. He caught her, his own wound tearing open with the effort. He gritted his teeth but did not complain. He simply lifted her again, moving forward. In the silence, she studied him. His face was hard but human. His eyes filled with fire. Every action he took screamed of pain. Yet he did not stop. She whispered, "Why me? Why not leave?" He answered without looking back. "Because I choose to save, not abandon." His words felt strange to her ears. To choose mercy in war. To choose to protect an enemy. It was madness, it was weakness, and yet it felt stronger than anything she had ever known. They reached a bunker half buried in the earth. The human pushed the door with his shoulder until it opened. Inside was dark, damp, filled with dust. But it was shelter he guided her in, laying her against the wall for the first time since the battle. She felt safe. The human sank down beside her, his breath heavy, his eyes tired. Blood still flowed from his arm, staining his torn sleeve. She reached out weakly, pointing at the wound. "You are bleeding. You should rest," she said. He only shrugged, pulling out a torn cloth with rough hands. He wrapped it around his arm. "It's nothing," he muttered. She watched in silence. Her people would never have done this. They would never have wasted their strength for one left behind. But this man, this stranger, gave what little he had, even to her, the enemy. The bunker was quiet now. Only their breathing filled the air. Her eyes closed for a moment, then opened again. Fear clawed at her. Fear that if she slept, he would be gone. But he was still there, sitting in the dark, his back against the wall, his gaze steady on the door. Guarding, protecting, choosing to stay. She whispered again, her voice trembling. "What is your name?" For a moment he hesitated, as if a name was too heavy to share. Then he answered softly, "Daniel. Daniel." The sound was strange to her tongue. She repeated it in a whisper, and for the first time her voice carried something other than fear. The human glanced at her, his lips forming a faint smile. "And yours?" he asked. Her heart tightened, but she spoke. "Lyra." The names hung in the air. 2 enemies, now 2 survivors. The bunker walls seemed less heavy now, the silence less dark. And for the first time, she felt the tiniest spark of something she had thought impossible. Hope. Outside, the war raged. On machines crawled over ruins, armies clashed in the distance, but here, inside this forgotten shelter, a choice had been made. A human had chosen to save an alien. An alien had chosen to trust a human. and the world, though still burning, felt a little less cruel. Daniel leaned his head back, his eyes closing for a moment. His voice broke the silence, soft but firm. Tomorrow, we move further. There's a safe path through the ruins, but it won't be easy. Lyra looked at him, her body weak, her spirit torn. But for the first time since her people abandoned her, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. And as she closed her eyes, she did not feel abandoned anymore. She felt carried, chosen, protected. The night stretched on. Danger waited outside, death circled like a shadow. But inside the bunker, in the dark, there was something stronger. The beginning of a bond, the seed of trust, the first step toward a story greater than war. The bunker was silent. Shadows stretched across the cracked walls. The smell of smoke drifted in from the battlefield outside. Lyra sat against the wall, her body weak, her mind restless. Daniel sat a few steps away, his back straight, his hand resting near the knife at his belt. Neither spoke for a long time, but silence was not peace. It was heavy, thick, pressing on both of them. Finally, Lyra whispered, her voice soft but sharp. Why are you really here, Daniel? Why did you not run when you had the chance? Her words trembled, filled with suspicion and confusion. Daniel's eyes opened slowly, his gaze steady on her. I already told you, he said quietly. No one deserves to die alone. But she shook her head. Her kind did not believe in mercy. Her people had abandoned her the moment she slowed. To them, weakness was death and compassion was betrayal. You risk your life for nothing, she murmured. I am not your ally, I am not your friend. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his answer was simple. Maybe not now, but you are still alive, and that matters. The words echoed in her mind. Alive, he said, as if life itself was worth saving, even hers, even an enemy's. For a moment her chest ached in a way she could not explain. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes. The firelight from outside flickered, faintly through cracks in the bunker. Lyra studied him in silence. His face was rough. Dirt smeared across his skin, blood still marked his sleeve. Yet his expression was calm, as if carrying her through ruins was a natural choice. As if he had carried burdens heavier than her before, she finally asked, Who left you, Daniel? His eyes opened, surprised by the question. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he spoke. My unit, the others. We were overrun. I tried to pull a man out. He was trapped under metal. But they ordered me to leave, to retreat. I refused, and when I looked back they were gone. They abandoned me. His voice was steady, but his eyes held shadows. Pain lived in his words, sharp and raw. Lyra's breath caught. In that moment, she saw him differently. He was not just a human soldier, not just an enemy. He was broken too. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to tell him that she understood, that she too had felt the sting of being left behind, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, You tried to save him. Daniel nodded. Yes, but I failed. The silence returned. But it was softer now. Not heavy with mistrust, but fragile with truth. Two broken lives sitting in the dark, each carrying scars left by their own people. For the first time, Lyra's suspicion began to fade. She looked at Daniel not as the enemy, but as someone like her, someone who knew betrayal, someone who knew loss. Her body trembled, cold, seeping through her skin. Daniel noticed, without a word. He pulled off his torn jacket. He placed it over her shoulders. It was heavy, smelling of smoke and sweat, but it was warmth. Her eyes widened, shocked. You will freeze, she whispered. Daniel shook his head. I'll live. She clutched the jacket, her hands tight. Her people had left her to die, but this human gave her the last warmth he had. She could not understand it, and yet, deep inside, she wanted to believe it. Hours passed. Outside, the sound of war faded into the distance. Inside, they sat in fragile silence. Her body leaned against the wall, his against the other side. She spoke suddenly, surprising herself. "My people called me weak," she said, her voice breaking. "They said I was not fit to stand among them, so they left me alone. They believed strength was the only law." Daniel turned his head toward her, his eyes calm. "They were wrong," he said softly. "Strength isn't leaving someone behind. Strength is carrying them forward even when it hurts." Her throat tightened. For so long she had believed her people, believed their laws. But now, in the dark, she heard something new. Something she had never dared imagine. Strength in kindness, strength in mercy. Her eyes burned with tears, though she tried to hide them. She had been abandoned, but here was a stranger who refused to leave. The human and the alien, both broken, both betrayed. But together, they were not alone. The night stretched on. The bunker creaked, dust falling from its broken ceiling, but neither of them slept. They sat in silence, carrying each other's pain. Two lives, once enemies, now tied by the same wound. Two broken souls finding a strange, fragile bond in the ashes of war. And though dawn was still far away, for the first time, the night did not feel endless. For the first time, Lyra believed that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth living for. Not victory, not glory, not war, but a single choice. A choice to stay, a choice to save, a choice that had brought two broken lives together. The bunker was quiet, but outside the world was not. The night still shook with distant thunder, not from storms but from weapons. Machines crawled across the broken land, searching for life, hunting survivors. Their red lights cut through the smoke like burning eyes. Every sound was sharp, every shadow dangerous. Daniel listened carefully, his ear close to the cracked wall. His face was tense, his breath low. Lyra watched him, her chest heavy with fear. She wanted to believe they were safe, but safety did not exist in this place. The war was everywhere. Daniel finally turned toward her. "We cannot stay here long," he said quietly. "They will sweep this place, and when they do, we will be trapped." Lyra lowered her eyes, her voice weak. "I can barely walk." Daniel nodded slowly. "I will carry you if I must." The words hit her like fire. Carry her, an enemy, through the ruins of war. Her own people had called her weak, but this human offered his strength without hesitation. She wanted to refuse, wanted to keep her pride, but deep inside she felt something different. A flicker of trust, a fragile spark. The sound of engines roared closer. Daniel moved quickly, pulling her up. Her legs shook, but his grip was strong. Step by step, they moved out of the bunker. The night air was colder now, filled with dust and smoke. Above them, the sky was black. No stars, no moon, only war. They crept through ruins. Daniel guided her with slow steps, his eyes scanning every shadow. She leaned against him, her body weak, but her mind sharp. "Left," she whispered suddenly. He paused, surprised. "There is a gap in the patrol there," she explained. Daniel looked at her, then nodded. "Lead the way." It was the first time he let her guide. Her people had built these machines, these patterns of patrol. She knew how they searched, how they moved. Step by step she directed him through the ruins. Every corner they turned was a gamble. Every breath they took felt like a risk. They crawled under twisted beams. They crossed open ground only when the lights turned away. At one point, a machine passed so close its shadow swallowed them. Daniel pulled her against the wall, holding her tight. Her heart thundered in her chest. His breath was warm against her face. Neither moved, neither spoke, until the machine's sound faded into the distance. When he finally released her, she looked into his eyes. For a moment, the war around them disappeared. There was only the beating of two hearts, two enemies hiding together in the same shadow. Two lives bound by survival. They pressed on, through cracked streets, over shattered glass, past the skeletons of buildings that once stood tall. Every ruin whispered of lives lost, of people who had fought and fallen. The war had taken everything from this place. And yet, in the silence between explosions, Daniel and Lyra walked together, not as soldier and alien, but as survivors. They found shelter beneath a broken bridge. Daniel set her down carefully, his own body trembling with exhaustion. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. Lyra watched him, her mind restless. He gave everything for her safety, but who gave anything for him? The thought pressed into her chest, heavy and strange. After a long silence, she spoke, "And Daniel, why do humans fight so hard even when hope is gone?" His eyes opened slowly, his gaze calm. "Because hope is never gone," he said. "Even in the darkest ruins, even when we are broken, hope is what keeps us moving." His words lingered in her mind. Hope. Her people had never spoken of such a thing. To them, survival was law. Strength was truth. But this human carried something different, and that difference had kept her alive. The sound of footsteps echoed again. Closer now, Daniel tensed, pulling his knife. But Lyra grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "No, there is a hidden path under the rubble. I can show you, but you must trust me." Daniel hesitated, the knife still in his hand. To trust her, an alien, could mean death, but he saw her eyes, filled not with lies but with fear and truth. Finally he nodded. "Show me." Together they pushed through the rubble. Lyra guided him to a narrow passage under the broken ground. It smelled of dust and ash, but it was hidden from the patrols above. Step by step, they crawled into the darkness. The world outside raged with war, but here, in the shadows, they found a way forward. When they finally emerged, the night was quieter. The patrols had moved further away. Daniel sank to his knees, his body shaking from the effort. Lyra sat beside him, her chest heavy but her heart lighter than before. For the first time, she felt that together they could survive. For the first time, she believed in a future beyond the ruins. The world outside was filled with danger, but inside the bond growing between them there was something stronger, something even war could not destroy. And though dawn was still far away, Daniel and Lyra looked at each other and saw not enemies, but two lives, walking the same path, two broken souls daring to believe in hope. The ruins grew colder as night stretched on. The silence of the world outside was broken only by the faint hum of distant machines. Daniel searched the dark corners until he found a small space beneath fallen stone. It was hidden, safe enough for a few hours. He guided Lyra inside, his arm steady around her. Her legs trembled, but she followed. Together they entered the shadows, survivors bound by need. Inside the shelter, Daniel lowered his pack. From it, he pulled a broken lighter and a few scraps of wood. His hands moved, slowly, carefully. The spark flickered, then caught. A tiny flame grew, glowing against the broken walls. Lyra's eyes widened, the light dancing in her gaze. Fire, warm and alive. Something so small yet so powerful in a world of ruins. They sat near it, their faces lit by the glow. Daniel leaned back, exhausted. His body was weak, but he smiled faintly as the warmth touched them. Lyra pulled her arms, close, letting the fire chase away the cold. For the first time since she had fallen on the battlefield, her body no longer shook. The warmth sank into her skin. The silence between them softened. Daniel reached into his pack again, pulling out a small tin. Inside were pieces of dried food, almost nothing. He split it in half, handing one piece to her. Her eyes narrowed, her voice uncertain. "This is yours. Why give it to me?" Daniel shrugged. "You need it as much as I do." Lyra hesitated, her pride fighting her hunger. Her people had never shared, never wasted strength on another. But the smell reached her, sharp and bitter. At last, she took it. Slowly, she ate, her hands trembling. Daniel ate his share in silence. Two enemies, now sharing fire and food. After a long moment, she spoke. "My name. You asked it before." Her voice was low, heavy with thought. "It is Lyra." Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft. Lyra, he repeated. The sound was strange to her ears, but gentle. For the first time in her life, her name felt safe, not spoken in anger, not spoken in judgment, but spoken with respect. The fire cracked. Lyra looked at him across the flames. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why save me, Daniel? Why risk your life for me?" He was quiet. For a long moment, staring into the fire, finally he spoke. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind, and I will not do the same to another. Not again." His words struck deep. Her chest tightened, her breath uneven. She thought of her people walking away, leaving her broken, and she thought of him, standing firm when he had every reason to leave. Her throat ached, but no words came. The firelight flickered, painting shadows on their faces. She whispered finally, "My people see mercy as weakness. They see kindness as a chain. But sitting here, I wonder if they were wrong." Daniel's eyes lifted, meeting hers. "They were wrong," he said simply. "Mercy is not weakness, it is the strength to stand against cruelty, even when the world calls you a fool." The words settled into her like seeds. Heavy but full of meaning, she had never heard such truth, and for the first time she wanted to believe it, not because of his words alone, but because of his actions. The night stretched on. They sat close to the fire, the warmth surrounding. Then Daniel told her small pieces of his story, of battles fought, of comrades lost, of a home far away. His voice was rough, but steady. Each word carried the weight of survival. Lyra listened, her heart heavy but alive. For the first time, she wanted to know about him. Not as an enemy, but as a man. When he finished, silence returned. She found herself speaking without thinking. "I was trained for war since I could walk," she said softly. "I was told victory was honor and defeat was death. But when they abandoned me, I felt neither. I felt empty." Her voice cracked, but Daniel did not interrupt. He only listened, his eyes calm, his presence steady. For her, that was enough. The fire dimmed. Lyra's eyes grew heavy. She leaned back against the stone, her body still weak but her spirit less broken. Before sleep took her, she whispered one last thought. "Perhaps I was left behind so I could meet you." Daniel looked at her, his face unreadable. He did not answer. He only placed another piece of wood on the fire. The flame grew again, steady and warm. He sat there, guarding the silence, watching the fire. Watching her, and in that quiet place, two strangers found something greater than survival. They found the beginning of trust, the first spark of a bond that even war could not destroy. Outside, the world still burned, but here, near a fragile fire, hope was alive. And for both Daniel and Lyra, that was enough to face another dawn. The night gave no mercy. The fire they shared had burned low, and the cold crept in again. Lyra stirred awake, her body aching, her eyes heavy. But the sound that pulled her from sleep was not the crackle of flames. It was the hum of engines, the metallic roar of machines drawing closer. Daniel was already awake, crouched near the edge of the shelter, his knife in his hand, his face set. Like stone, he did not speak, only lifted a finger to his lips. Lyra's heart raced as she sat up, listening. The ground trembled softly, as if the ruins themselves feared what was coming. Red lights swept across the broken streets. Shadows grew long and sharp. The patrol was larger this time. More soldiers, more machines, all searching. They were hunting, and they were close. Daniel moved quickly, gathering what little he had. He handed her the torn jacket. "Stay quiet, stay ready," he whispered. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the truth. He was afraid. The machines passed once, then circled back. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She knew their pattern, knew their method. "They have our scent," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They will not leave until they find us." Daniel's grip on the knife tightened. "Then we don't let them," he said. His words were simple but heavy. She could see it in his face. He was ready to fight, even if it meant dying here. Lyra's chest ached. She wanted to tell him to run, to leave her, but she knew he would not. The fire from lasting. Night still lived in her memory. The warmth, the words, the bond. She could not ask him to abandon her now. The sound grew louder. Metal feet crushed stone, voices called through the dark. Daniel moved closer to her, his back straight. He looked like a wall of flesh and blood, ready to block death itself. For her, she whispered, "You cannot fight them alone." Daniel glanced at her, his face grim. "Then don't let me fight alone," he said. The word struck deep. Her body was weak, her wounds still raw, but his voice lit something inside her, a spark that refused to die. The first machine came into sight, its red eye glowing. Daniel crouched low, his muscles tense. Lyra pressed her hand to the ground. Her people had abandoned her, but their training remained. She knew how these machines thought, how they searched, how they hunted, and how they could be broken. She whispered quickly, guiding him. "The joints at the neck and legs, that is their weakness." Daniel nodded once, no hesitation. The machine drew closer, the hum of its engine sharp in the silence. And then, it turned its light toward them. Daniel lunged. The fight was fast, brutal. His knife struck, sparks flew, metal screamed. The machine shuddered, its red eye dimming, but more footsteps echoed, more lights approached. There were two. Many. Daniel pulled back, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his arm again. The shadows around them filled with enemy shapes. Lyra's heart thundered. This was the end, she thought. No escape, no dawn, only death. But Daniel stood tall, his knife. Ready? He placed himself between her and the enemy, his voice steady, his words sharp. "If they want you, they go through me." Her breath caught. No one had ever stood for her, not her people, not her kind. Only him, a human, a stranger who should have hated her. And in that moment, something inside her broke. The fear, the doubt, the chains of her past. She pushed herself to her feet. Her body screamed in pain, but she ignored it. She stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, her eyes burning with fire. "They will go through us both," she said. Daniel looked at her, surprise flashing in his eyes. Then a faint smile touched. His lips together, they faced the shadows. Together they stood. The enemy drew closer. The sound of metal claws on stone filled the air. The glow of red eyes surrounded them. Daniel tightened his grip on the knife. Lyra clenched her fists, her heart steady for the first time. The moment stretched, heavy and endless. Death was near, but so was something else. Strength. Not the strength of armies, not the strength of weapons, but the strength of two broken souls who refused to fall. The machines charged. The world roared, and side by side, human and alien struck back. Their cries echoed in the ruins, not of enemies, not of strangers, but of survivors who had chosen each other. The battle was fierce. Every moment, a storm. But in the fire of that storm, they found something unshakable. Not victory, not safety, but unity. And in that unity, they became more than broken. They became unbreakable. The ruins shook with the echoes of battle. Metal lay broken across the ground, sparks fading into the night. The air was heavy with smoke, blood, and the silence after chaos. Daniel stood with his chest heaving, his knife dripping, his body trembling. Beside him, Lyra leaned against the shattered wall, her hands cut and bruised, her eyes blazing. They were alive, against all odds. Alive. The machines had fallen, their glowing eyes gone dark. But more could come. More always came. The war outside had not ended. It never ended. And yet, in this small corner of the battlefield, something had changed. Daniel dropped to his knees, exhausted. His breath came, rough, his strength nearly gone. Lyra lowered herself beside him, her own body weak. For a moment they simply sat in silence, not as alien and human, not as enemy and enemy, but as two souls who had refused to give up. Her eyes turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "You should have run, Daniel. You could have left me, and you might have lived." He shook his head. slowly wiping blood from his face. "I told you before I don't leave people behind." The words struck her heart once more. Simple words, yet heavier than stone. Her own people had abandoned her, but he, a stranger, a human, had stood beside her until the end, and even now, with nothing left to give, he stayed. The night grew quiet, the distant sounds of war fading. The stars broke through the smoke above, faint but real. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra looked at the sky without despair. She whispered almost to herself, "Maybe I was meant to die that night, but I opened my eyes to see you instead." Daniel looked at her, his face tired but alive. "And you chose to fight," he said. "You didn't have to, but you did." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, because for the first time I was not fighting for my people. I was not fighting for victory, I was fighting for you." Her voice cracked, but her eyes held steady. In that moment, the truth was clear. Her loyalty no longer belonged to those who had abandoned her. It belonged to the one who had chosen her. Her enemy had become her ally. Her ally had become something more. The silence stretched, heavy but warm. Daniel leaned back against the wall, his body weak. He looked at her, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "Then maybe we both found something worth living for," he said. She returned the smile, her heart trembling. "Yes," she whispered. "For the first time I am not alone." The dawn began to rise. Light crept slowly over the ruins, painting gold across broken stone. The battlefield was still. Scarred, still lifeless, but in the new light it did not look like the end, it looked like a beginning. Daniel stood with effort, his legs unsteady. He held out his hand to her. "Come," he said. "We can't stay here, there's a world beyond these ruins, we'll find it." Lyra looked at his hand, strong though scarred. She hesitated, her heart racing. Then she reached out, her fingers trembling, and she took it. His grip closed around hers. Steady, firm, unyielding. She rose to her feet, standing beside him. Together, they faced the horizon, the war behind them, the unknown before them. But for the first time, the future did not feel like fear. It felt like hope. As they walked step by step through the ruins, Lyra thought of her people, of the ones who had left her to die. She thought of their cold eyes, their cruel laws, and she realized something deep. They had been wrong. Strength was not leaving the weak behind. Strength was not victory through cruelty. Strength was this, a human's hand pulling her from the dark. A choice made not out of duty but out of heart. Daniel's voice broke the silence as they moved forward. "One day, this war will end. When it does, we'll need more than soldiers. We'll need people who can see past the enemy, people who can choose something better." Lyra listened, her chest tight, and for the first time she wanted to believe in such a future. Not just for him, not just for her, but for them both. The morning sun rose higher. The light fell across their faces, two figures moving together through the ashes of war. No longer strangers, no longer enemies, but something far stronger. Bound not by blood, not by orders, but by choice. The choice to save, the choice to trust, the choice to walk forward together. And in that choice, there was no defeat. There was only victory. Lyra's eyes closed for a moment as they walked. Her heart whispered words she never thought she would feel. She had been abandoned once, left to die in the dark. But now, with Daniel's hand holding hers, she was not abandoned anymore, she was chosen. And so the story of an alien and a human, two broken lives on a battlefield of death, did not end. With silence, it began with hope. It began with fire. It began with a hand that refused to let go.